out here. If you're ready to go on a journey, I'm ready to take you. All right. Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Good evening and welcome. For the next span of time we spend together, I would like to share with you just a brief portion of my extraordinary spiritual journey into death and back. This will include background information, angelic healings, meetings, and 3 of my near-death experiences. It is my sincere wish that from this you will be offered comfort, hope, and a glimpse of heaven. For those who may be unfamiliar with the term near-death experience, or NDE, it is exactly what it sounds like. A person, usually very ill, undergoing surgery, or involved in an accident of some sort, has the sensation of leaving their physical body and being able to travel quite easily away from it via an astral or soul body to other dimensions of time and space. From my personal experiences, this event happens quite suddenly and during a moment of intense crisis. As the individual finds themselves in the remarkable position of standing near or floating above their physical body, they start the process of detachment from it. Yet, probably due to its echoing familiarity, some continue to be hesitant about leaving it behind. At the same time, they become very curious about their present situation. Many feel a sort of fierce pull to leave the body behind and go somewhere else. They are not exactly sure where this other place is, but they sense that it is safe. Most, before leaving, will take careful inventory of the events occurring around them, events that seem to be happening on a movie screen and not to them personally. At this point, the feeling of detachment takes hold a bit more firmly. Who have died during surgery report floating up out of their bodies, usually through the head, and going up to a corner of the room in soul form. From this new and unusual vantage point, they are able to look down at the doctors and nurses trying desperately to save them. During this intermission time, fantastic things are happening to the NDEer. Many will report that every one of their senses was amped up during the experience. Colors become extremely brilliant, yet the brightness does not hurt the eyes. Hearing becomes so acute that sounds from great distances are easily heard. Those who have been paralyzed, lost a limb, or have been very ill find they are whole and totally healed. This new soul body is so light and so beautiful, most will return to speak about feeling more alive and vital than they have in years. Also, due to the amped up senses, many upon return to their physical bodies will be able to recount conversations that went on during any resuscitation attempts, and some will be able to recall conversations from other rooms that were at a great distance. I remember speaking to a young woman who died during an emergency surgical procedure and who immediately, upon leaving her body, felt drawn in soul form a distance away because the sound of crying in another room pierced her senses to the extreme. She felt pulled in soul form through walls and down a corridor to the waiting room where her younger sister was crying and saying, "Please don't die now, I need you so much." It should be noted that the NDEer had no knowledge that her sister was even in the hospital, what clothes she was wearing, or that what the time was. Later, when the operated upon older sister was able to talk to her sibling, she was able to correctly repeat what the young girl had said, what she was wearing, and the time on the clock in the waiting room. And yes, many ND ears, almost immediately upon leaving their bodies, will take note of the time on a clock or timepiece if one is available. For those who are not instantly drawn away while life-saving measures were commencing, the ND ear finally gives in to that intense tug and begins the journey away from the physical self. Soon they find there is pure joy in the feeling of freedom and release allowed as they drift away from the ill or injured physical form. Within the span of a few seconds, the weight of earthly cares and concerns seems suddenly less important, and what lies ahead captures the enhanced senses. Again, from my own personal experiences with NDEs and from others who have come forward to talk about theirs, there is absolutely no fear or anxiety during this process. Curiosity, yes. Liberation, yes. Concern of the life behind, not often. Joy in the freedom of release, yes. Personally, I have found that one of the most amazing things that happens during an NDE is the alteration of time, and the fact that on the other side of life's door, it seems suspended, as if it no longer matters. What seems like minutes here is only a millisecond there. There's an old saying I remember about eternal time, and it goes something like this. Every 1,000 years, an eagle soars past a mountain, and its wings graze the peak. In eternity, only a minute has passed. Eternal time is totally different from earth time, and the returning NDEer is usually amazed when they find that time seems so different here. The next important event that almost every NDEer encounters is a meeting with the being of light. This is usually a guardian angel, a spirit guide, or a much-loved relative or friend who has passed over. This being, I know from my own NDEs, has been assigned to not only watch over one during earthly life, but to also guide the soul towards home on the other side of life's doorway when earthly life is done. The guide never speaks in words, as we do on earth, but with a sort of mental communication from their mind to that of the NDEer. I have never experienced it, but some report that the being of light travels with them through an extremely bright tunnel of light. The sense of urgency to get through the tunnel is felt by the NDEer on all levels. The sensation is apparently not at all unpleasant, just rapid, like a really fast slide, going down a really fast slide at the park. The soul soon emerges on the other side of the tunnel into whatever scenario resonates with their personal view of the afterlife. For some, that could be the biblical version of heaven. For others, it might be a beloved home or vacation spot. I have found that it is all extremely personal and attuned to the individual's view of paradise. Many will report that the being of light pauses to help the NDEer take inventory of their earthly life thus far. This sometimes occurs as a sort of rapid slideshow or a mind projection from the guide. There is often amazement when the NDEer is shown a particularly action, and the being of light responds not with anger or retribution, but with compassion and understanding. Oftentimes, the being of light will state that the soul was learning a lesson and further work will need to be done. At some point, and after allowing the ND ear to have a look around, and perhaps briefly see passed on loved ones, the guide tells them it is time for them to leave. This moment is usually fraught with intense emotions. No one wants to leave paradise and go through the anguish of letting go of beloved friends and family, but there is no choice. The guide must be obeyed. It is usually just before leaving that the guide will sometimes give the ND ear a sacred earthly mission to complete, or tell them in no uncertain terms that if they wish to come back to paradise after death, they must make every effort to right the wrongs they have done to others and not granted ever again. Many ND ears who return to life and who do not brush off the event as a mere dream or hallucination find that they are not only grateful for another chance, but also vow to do whatever the being of light had requested. For most ND ears, the other benefit of the experience is finding that the last frontier known as death has been conquered. And because they know where they are going when they're earthly and they have fulfilled their missions, they let go of fear and embrace life with purpose and joy. And now some questions many have asked me over the years. What does it feel like to die? To let go of earthly attachments, be free of illness, worry, concerns, bills, problems of any sort? Is there really anything at all after we die? Or is there only blackness, void? Is there really a heaven, a nirvana, or a paradise awaiting us? Honest questions and noteworthy thoughts. And now a little background information on how my extraordinary spiritual journey began. I must say that I credit my grandfather, that wise old Irishman, with many things, but most importantly, not only his curiosity about life, but also his total and absolute belief in ghosts, angels, and the afterlife. When I was no more than age 3, my grandfather used to regale me with fantastic stories of his life and his Irish. As a young man, Grandpa had been a gravedigger there and had both a personal and a professional relationship with death. And the subject held great fascination for him, not in a morbid sense, but more as a topic of interest. And so it seemed. He had spent years waiting for just the right and appreciative audience to come along. And when I attained the age of 3, he declared me to be that audience and began sharing his goosebump-raising tales with me. I seem to remember that it was usually on a crispy, cold, mid-autumn night when he would gather me up in his arms and go sit on his chair by the big black kitchen wood stove. The baby Ben alarm clock ticked off the minutes, and Grandma sat nearby combing her hair before bedtime while the fire cracked and snapped in the grate, inviting drowsiness. I clutched my brown and gold teddy bear and my blue and yellow baby blanket and snuggled against Grandpa's chest, ready for the goosebump-raising tales. We were cuddled up. Grandpa usually began by clearing his throat several times just for effect. This always made me giggle quietly. He almost always began every story with me and then went into the telling of it. Sometimes it was the tale of the ghostly figures he had seen drifting about the old churchyards near his Irish home. These unfortunate specters always seemed to wail and moan a lot. Grandpa said they were just lost or lonely, nothing to be afraid of. Other stories involved his grave-digging days, when he would have to dig up an already occupied spot and bury a new resident atop the old. He said that because the coffin beneath had usually rotted through, he could easily see the remains parted. Not much left, he said, just some bones, teeth, and bits of rotted cloth. Nothing to be scared of, he said again in his matter-of-fact voice. The soul had usually flown away long ago. odd stories to be telling such a young